Talk Money with me. We are so happy that you are here today, and I have a very special guest for you that I'm going to introduce in a moment, Dr. Moira Somers, who is also a friend of mine, incredibly respected, not just in the Canadian community, but internationally. She is such a treat. I know you're going to enjoy hearing from her. We're going to be talking about top financial skills for the modern family. Well, specifically, Dr. Somers is going to be. And I met Dr. Somers with FP Canada when we were doing some videos and talking about stress and financial stress and the cognitive capacity load, the restriction on your mind that happens when you're stressed. And of course, COVID has exacerbated all of that. So I know you're going to love this conversation. It will be available afterwards, so you can send it to your friends and colleagues. I know there's consumers on this event and those in the financial industry. Both of you are going to benefit from Dr. Somers' advice. And if you have questions, we're going to be answering all of your questions, hopefully getting through all of them. Make sure that you're sending those in on the platform that you're watching, or if you're a little financially shy, that's okay. I have my incredible general manager, Maroki Tong, on the other side of our email and Facebook. So you can email us at info@kelleykeehn.com, or just on my page on Facebook. You can send a little message. It's okay if you don't want everyone to know your question or who it's coming from. She will make sure that she gets that to us. And if you'd like to go and review any of our past Talk Money with me events, you can do so on my blog at kelleykeehn.com. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the fabulous Dr. Moira Somers. You're going to learn more about her background. She's a neuropsychologist specializing in financial issues and really understanding what's going on in our, with our mind, with our brain, with our emotions when it comes to money. And I know you're going to want to reach out to her for help, but right now Moira's at the point where she's only providing consultations through financial professionals. You're going to have to contact your financial professional, or if you are one, make sure you get in touch with Dr. Somers. Her website is fantastic, moneymindandmeaning.com. We're going to dig into some of her great blogs. You can connect with her on LinkedIn, and she has a fantastic book called Advice That Sticks. I've been really lucky to hear her in person talk about that internationally acclaimed and best-selling book. So Dr. Moira Somers, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kelley. I've been looking forward to this all week.
I have too. So start us off. When and FP Canada has engaged you a number of times in their press releases when they've come out with the financial stress survey. Mm-hmm. And what I find fascinating, I quote you all the time, that temporarily our IQ actually drops when we're financially stressed. Just when you need to be at your best, when you're studying or at work or what have you, our brain is not there to help us out. Can you talk a little bit about COVID and financial stress and what you're finding people are dealing with?
Mm-hmm. In particular, it seems to be financial scarcity, that when people are believing that they may not have enough, whether that's actually true objectively or not, it's the subjective thing that matters at that moment. So much of our brain's resources go to kind of hyper-focusing on that problem and trying to solve it, that we temporarily lose capacity in other areas, including the ability to see things that are outside the spotlight, outside of the very hyper focus that we have on trying to solve the problem. And sometimes, of course, as we know, the solutions to our problems lie outside what we already know. They lie with other people. They lie with other ideas. And so if we hyper-focus for too long, we actually lose access to our best thinking, and we get really depleted. So it can be a not so great space to stay in long term. Fortunately, it's recoverable. It's not like, some conch on the bean that destroys brain cells. It's recoverable, but we do have to be really careful about making irreversible decisions during times of financial scarcity.
So how do we get out of that, Moira? Is it engaging with a professional? Is it getting more interactive with our finances? Like, how does one kind of open up their focus, open up their gaze, and see what they can't see themselves?
One of the best predictors for getting through stressful times intact, if you only had one arrow in your quiver to deal with the problem, that arrow should be social support. Other people are our best and our greatest resource, not just in terms of emotional support, the sort of there, let me give you a kind of, which is important, but also there, let me introduce you to somebody who might be able to help, or have you ever tried, or there's a group for people who are dealing with the struggles you're doing. There's all kinds of social support, emotional, practical, instrumental. And so that's one way of getting out of that hyper-focus. But even before we do that, the one thing that we always have with us, literally to our dying day, is our breath. And if you want the quickest metabolic pathway out of unhelpful, stressful states, it's to sit there for a while and to breathe deeply and intentionally and meaningfully. And in a few seconds, you start changing your own physiology so that you actually can start to get better access to your breath. It's kind of magical.
I feel more calm just listening to you say that, thinking how often we just don't take that breath. But when it comes to finances, I don't know how you feel. I think it's very similar principles when it comes to our physical being and staying in physical shape. And in the 1960s and 1970s, we used to whisper the word cancer, and today we run for the cure. It's just a totally different mindset. We don't feel shame. I think most people don't feel shame about a disease, and we would never make someone else feel shameful about it. Yet when it comes to money issues or a lack thereof, oftentimes people feel so much embarrassment and shame and don't want to call a friend or a colleague or go to a support group. What little steps do you think that people could take to start to reduce that embarrassment and that shame?
You're right. Shame is this really kind of interesting emotion in some ways, because it is imperative that we should hide, right? Shame is one of those emotions that's got this inbuilt impulse to just slink away and hide. And it's something that we need to be really careful about, because often that's not helpful. As I said, if you only had one arrow in that quiver, it should be other people, and it's really hard to access them if you're hiding out. That FP Canada survey that you cited, Kelley, actually showed that millennials in particular feel financial shame really readily. And I'm seeing it in younger folks now. And I think it's because there's this sort of assumption that everybody else is doing better than they are, and that they should be doing better than they actually are. And maybe it's because we're looking at, Keep Up with the Kardashians or Say Yes to the Dress, like these over-the-top kind of shows and social media messages that say having a fabulous life equates to having this fabulous stuff or fabulous experiences. And we know that that's not true. We know the science is really clear on that it's not true. But when that seems to be the cultural standard for what it means to live well and to be doing well, and you've concluded that you're not up to that standard, it does make it hard to reach out and to be grounded in what the reality is for most people in their financial lives.
Do you think that COVID has changed that? Do you think that COVID, just because people couldn't spend as much, they couldn't go out, they aren't, filling up their Instagram with all these fabulous experiences, we're all kind of in the same situation, and millions of people did have to defer their mortgages or lost their jobs? Do you think that will help people kind of pause of what's important, and also because so many people had financial challenges and do during COVID, that maybe they'll open up to others more freely?
Yeah, I sure hope if I could, if there were a wishing well that we could throw our coins into, I'd be putting mine in there. I think there has been a massive rethinking in society about how we've been living and what matters. And I hope that comes down to the individual level of understanding that things can happen in your financial life that will take you down at the knees, that events that did not have your permission or involvement to do that. And illness is one, and unexpected employment event can certainly be another. And as more and more people are affected by what turns out to be the prolonged nature of this stress, I think that perhaps we will be seeing less shame and more compassion, more understanding, less judgment. At least that would be my hope.
That's a great hope. That's a great hope. I was noodling around on your website, and you're looking through some of your blog articles, which are fantastic, by the way. There's a couple I want to ask you about, like the perils of pre-spending, the best ever productivity hack. But before we get to those, maybe we'll save those for later. So again, it's moneymindandmeaning.com. Moira, you talk about emotional intelligence, and I think that's so important. And you had 4 things up on that, and we're going to get to your top 10 list in a moment as well. But do you want to talk about earning adequately? What do you mean by that? And then how does that tie back into emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so I created at the beginning of the year this top 10 list of what I thought were the financial skills needed in modern families. And it actually came out before COVID, but it came out because of things like unexpected events that happened in our family. And I thought, these big transition events that are normal and expected, but nevertheless pack a wallop both emotionally and financially. They do, as we move through family life, there are these different financial skills that are required. And so earning adequately shifts in response, of course, to changes in your family life. What it meant to be earning adequately as a single person may mean something very different when you have a partner and when you have children, when you have parents who might be coming to rely on you. And so the emotional intelligence that comes into that is the ability to reflect on how is it that you've come to understand what a good standard of living means? Are you living somebody else's script for you? Or are you truly living out your own values? And you have the capacity to kind of sit with any discomfort that might stir up in the short term and like we said earlier, breathe through it and then open up discussions about where it is that your thinking is shifting or changing direction, and how does that mesh with the people with whom you are financially intertwined. So there are these capacities for self-management, that's sort of emotional intelligence, and there's the second half of emotional intelligence, or EQ, which is all about reading other people and being able to work with other people's emotion. So it's kind of a right, left, you and the other person.
And one of the videos that we did a while ago, again with FP Canada, it was about talking to your spouse about money, and you had this salacious title about, when do you get financially naked with your spouse? When do you take those veils off? And have you found or heard from people that they maybe have been forced to have those conversations during COVID with their spouse, with their kids, with their family, because you're in one household, the bills are coming in, you're seeing it maybe in a way that you didn't before because of the busyness of getting in and out of the house for work? What are you hearing from couples?
Absolutely. We're hearing that people are becoming much more conscious about having money talks in their house now. And Kelley, it comes certainly in the families where the finances are strained because of how things have changed. In my own family, COVID meant massive, immediate hits. I'm married to a pilot. That industry, came to an abrupt halt, and there were salary changes for everybody in that industry. And like you, I am a professional speaker, and that dried up overnight or changed. I mean, it looked like it was drying up, but in fact, it just morphed. But immediately things happened. So of course, in families where those changes have happened, there have had to be discussions about what does that mean about our intended blah blah reno holiday, charitable giving. There have also been changes in families that other end, because many families have been finding that they're actually able to save more now. And there are some families where they're still doing well. In fact, they may be even doing better because of the industry that they're in. You know, if only we'd all invested in plexiglass before this had happened. But for those families that are aware of their luck, of their good fortune, many of them are now talking about how do we sensitively offer help to the members of our extended family who are struggling. And so, again, there's this skill development that's happening no matter where you are, no matter how you've been affected by the pandemic. We seem to be much more acutely aware of the fact that there are big needs out there, and sometimes that out there is within our own family, extended family, it's our kin network, our friendship network. So it's at both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on one of your top tips. So Maroki, if you want to put up Moira's top tips, we're going to start to dig into those. And your first one, Dr. Somers, is develop marketable skills. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about that? You mentioned it in your last answer, but.
Many people's work dried up overnight, or really started to shift, and they realized that if they were to be of value to their company, or if they wanted to keep their own companies afloat, they may have to pivot quite rapidly. And it's been a wake-up call for a lot of us who have been able to kind of get by on skills that we've always relied on, to realize, the world has changed significantly in the past 5 years. And if we don't know how to get online, if we haven't learned what it is to network in this economy with social marketing, with social media in place of live events, then we're going to be seriously disadvantaged. And so as parents and as workers ourselves, we have to be talking about and figuring out where are those marketable skills that we might need to be upping our game on so that we can stay current and relevant in today's economy.
Yeah, and Murky can pop that off now. Moira, how did people emotionally, especially people who are so invested, maybe someone like your husband that is a pilot, I mean, there's going to be a day he's going to fly again, but there are going to be people that their industry will disappear, their life business that they worked forever for, their restaurant or what have you, it may disappear. They may not be able to come back after this. Do you have any tips? The breathing through it is absolutely brilliant, but do you have any tips of how to separate yourself from your work while you're still at the same time following your advice of developing marketable skills?
Yeah, sometimes it takes another person to help us realize what it is that we know. We may have always thought of ourselves as a restaurant owner, to give an example, as somebody who welcomed people into a physical space and cooked for them. And, I heard on our local radio station last night, a restaurant owner who talked about he has maybe 7 or 8 people in the restaurant a day now. Wow. But his delivery service has gone, and he's been networking with one of those packaged meal kind of services to provide his secret ingredients so that people can make his recipes at home. And he's just so open-spirited about the possibility of possibility. And so I think that if you can do what it takes to get positive and stay positive, which doesn't mean the superficial, be happy, but really to tap into possibility thinking and to surround yourself with people who see you, who know you, who value what you do, and who can help reframe not just your business, but your personal skills. I work with clinically, I've worked with a lot of teachers in the past. And when teachers have just had it with being in the classroom, in Manitoba, they are sent to organizations that do these things called transferable skills analysis. Okay. And it turns out that if you've been a teacher, you've got a schwack of transferable skills that will make it into other domains that have nothing to do with little people, teaching folks how to set up a microscope in a lab. That there are these broader things that many of us know, and so understanding that your marketable skill may go way beyond the simple little job category that you've always known.
Yeah, and I love that you always have a positive spin on things, but you don't try to wash it with that positivity. I think it was you that said, you don't put a happy face sticker on your empty, light on your gas tank, right? That's not going to help you. You actually need these. Not going to help you. So that's great, Moira. That's number one. So number two is you talk about earn sufficiently. What do you mean by that?
Well, this is a problem that women in particular often have. This is a problem that people with a heart for helping other people often have, or a heart for the arts, for example, often have. That sometimes folks choose career without really looking at, can I make it in that career, in this real estate market, or in this city that I'm living in? And if I want to make it, how will I make that so? So to be more conscious of the flow of money in and out of your life, and to be able to adjust at one side or the other if the numbers aren't working out.
Yeah, absolutely. Number three is saving regularly.
I would love to hear your take on this, Kelley. But, when I was doing a lot more financial therapy work and dealing with folks who may have been on the third or fourth kind of debt repayment experience, crawling themselves, digging themselves into a hole and then crawling out of that hole and then finding that they were back in that hole. One of the things that I would sometimes turn on its head is like, let's not throw everything you have at the debt. Right. Because that leaves you in deprivation and in very real vulnerability if your hot water tank blows up. That saving is one of the ways that you build a ladder out of that hole. So whether you're in debt or whether you're in plenty, it's really important that you begin to form the savings habit and to provide that cushion, because savings means freedom and options much of the time. Kelley, you are the expert on this, so please teach us about what you know about saving.
You're very kind, Dr. Moira, and I think a lot of the people watching this have heard me talk more than enough, but I will just interject a little bit and say that I absolutely agree with you that it's, if you look at the numbers, of course, it's always going to make sense to pay down your high interest rate debt. Maybe not your mortgage, but your credit cards, if you got into a payday loan or something of that sort. But I agree with you that it's equally, if not even more important, especially during COVID, that you have those emergency savings built up, but more so, when you open up your bank app and you see that, okay, maybe you were only putting $25 a month away or $50 a month, it adds up. And then, you kind of get that little self-esteem boost where paying down your debt is great, but it's that away from, it's not that towards strategy. So you absolutely need both. I totally agree with you. But yeah, there's nothing that will, give you a greater sense of comfort and sleep at night factor than having that 3 to 6 months emergency savings. And theoretically, you could pay down your high interest rate credit cards and have that available credit for you in the event of an emergency. However, we did see during the financial crisis in the US and even in Canada that there was a rude awakening for some people that they did not really realize that a credit card is a demand loan. And at any time, a bank can take it back. So although you may be paying, right, you know this, Moira, well, you may be paying it if you were late a few payments or things of that sort, and you start to get it paid down sometimes. And I mean, this is not happening en masse, but it does happen that then you lose that cushion entirely. So you really you need to know your rights too as a Canadian. And I think, I'm going to ask you this question before we get to your fourth point, Moira. I wonder why, and I'm guilty of this too, but I wonder why when it comes to our money, we've heard that people spend more time planning their vacation and all that type of stuff. But, if you were taking up golf, for example, for the first time, or you were a new Canadian and wanted to learn about hockey, it would behoove you to know some of the basic fundamentals of, there's 18 rounds in a game of golf, that a bogey is a bad thing. There's 3 periods in a game of hockey and a hat trick is a great thing. But when it comes to our finances, I just find people don't really want to dig into it. Like, what do you think that's about? What are some of the excuses you hear about why people just don't even want to Google some of the basics?
Well, I'm experiencing this in my own family right now, that sometimes the stuff that comes out of my young adult kids' mouths is just like, who raised you? And part of what I'm realizing is that it's just fundamentals of prudent financial management as an individual. They're really quite boring.
Right.
They're way less fun than a hockey game, Kelley.
Yeah, that's true.
Might be more bruising if you don't learn about them, but there's a book that just came out last week by some of the top financial names in the world, like people who run hedge funds and people who run big companies, and it's called How I Invest My Money. And the thing that's just struck me about it is these high flyers are so boring when it comes to where they invest their personal finance. It's like low they invest in exchange traded funds that don't have anywhere near the upside, but also anywhere near the downside as some of the hedge funds that they have. So I think part of the problem is that it might be boring. And part of the problem is that we still have it far too complicated to do the right things with our money. The defaults are all set up in North America so that we don't save. We are very much in a consuming culture. Other continents, other countries are much more savings cultures, and frankly, it's just bred in the bone that savings are great and spending is a little suspect, and we have it backwards.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I mean, the number one rule of economics is incentives drive the market. And what have interest rates been? Record lows for decades. And I think if we were having this conversation in the 1980s, maybe Instagram would be all about, all the savings that you had instead of all the things that you're spending money on, because you wouldn't renovate a kitchen at 18% interest and you wouldn't, be ticking things off your bucket list, right? Mm-hmm. So part of it is boring. You're right. Everyone wants that sexy, hot stock tip or something of that sort, which doesn't exist or doesn't exist long because that's akin to gambling. But it's interesting. So number 5, kind of talking about debt and all that, is your 5th top list. And Roki, you can pop that up again just so our viewers can see that just for a second or two, is handling credit. Talk to me about that, Moira.
In my household, we were sort of taught that credit is bad. You should not have a credit card. Do not it was very much a debt averse. And yet we know that credit ratings, you will have a credit rating whether no matter what, so you better be in charge of where that's coming from. So families to be able to talk about what is a credit card, how do you establish a credit rating? How do you make it good? How do you inadvertently make it bad, or maybe unconsciously contribute to making that bad? I remember my first day of university, going into the Great Hall at the university where they were handing out packages of information, and the floor was littered with credit card applications, and wow, for 18-year-olds who,
Right.
would have, if they would have anything, they would have debt at that point, but they also had a credit card application in their hands and they could get it. And so if the credit card comes, example, when they gave you a credit card, gave you a one sheet in very large font that said, this is how to responsibly handle credit.
Yeah.
Read this and send it back to us as a condition of activating your credit card. Read it and sign it. It's these little things. We have the defaults set up in all the wrong directions. The default is you can have a credit card without ever learning anything about credit. What if we put that on its head? That you had to show that you knew about credit as a condition of getting it.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I would love to see more defaults. For example, when you get a mortgage, maybe an emergency fund is automatically set up for you. You can opt out, but if you just pay, it's just like the people that pay their property taxes through their bank. They're not late with their property taxes, but people who don't elect that option with their bank, they're almost always behind on their property taxes. So yeah, the industry could do a much better job nudging people in the right direction. And I agree with you that credit's so important. And in with my readers and things of that sort, what we often hear is they don't usually realize that their credit wasn't good until they go and apply for something and then get denied. That's exactly not the time that you want to be learning about that. That's great. So number 6 is invest, earn, give, and purchase sustainably. I love this, and no doubt this is one of your tips. Moira, tell us more about that.
Well, the sustainably part of it. And this is a perfect example of how what was sustainable last month, that may have changed very significantly. Again, in either direction. Perhaps beforehand, if you are one of those people that's actually able to save more right now, that means that perhaps that this is a time for you to think about giving more.
Right.
In many families, the goal is to be able to save throughout the earning years, have enough to live on in retirement, and then to pass on a legacy to one's heirs. And now I'm having very different conversations with many of the families I'm consulting to about, is there value in opening up the purse strings now to adult children who are struggling, possibly through no fault of their own. And so giving sustainably can change, just as the need to spend sustainably can change, and how much you can invest and what you need to be investing in. There's that EQ portion that comes in again. What the level of risk that I can take in my investment portfolio, that may have shifted for people. And it may have nothing to do with their time horizon till retirement, for example. It may have to do with the fact that there is so much more risk that is impinging on them emotionally and vocationally, that they are feeling a need to pull back or to change up some of their investment strategy. And their financial advisors need to know how to hold the reins lightly and to be both leading those conversations, leading people, and making sure that they're not selling in a down market and really doing regrettable things that way. But also to hear that sometimes what people have been able to tolerate when their job was really secure, or their kids' jobs were really secure, that may have changed. And so the investment may need to shift accordingly.
Yeah.
So these
and how much
Sorry, you and I, there was a little bit of an exchange that you and I had had on Twitter about how sometimes you set it and forget it, and that's the best way to live your financial life. This might not be one of those times, that we might need to be a little bit more conscious right now about what our settings were, I love how you always talk about those hidden subscriptions that we all have, for example, that we've set and forgotten about, and now is the time to look at them.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you. And I think also it's important for people that maybe, did the opposite of this, set and forget, are now, undoing that automation. Just make sure you're putting reminders in your calendar, I think is really important. Or if you're an advisor watching, make sure your clients are putting little reminders in their calendar. I haven't changed my, investing or things of that sort, but I can also tell you none of my financial institutions have reached out to me to say, hey, did you stop investing in your RSP or your TFSA? That's okay, but why don't we give you a little reminder just to make sure that you do get back on track at some point, or that maybe if you were saving $200 a month, just get back in at 25 and incrementally increase it. That's again a nudge that I have not seen done in the financial industry. So I think that's an important one. That's great, Moira. And when you were saying about loosening the purse strings, it's so important too that you're talking to your financial professional if you are thinking of gifting to your children, because we're coming up to Thanksgiving. We're coming up to, we might not be celebrating in a dynamic family way like we did last year, depending on where you're watching this from. However, I think you'll agree, Moira, that when one child gets help that maybe other siblings didn't, that can create a lot of tension in the family as well. So definitely, maybe if you're going to give something now that you are going to gift at your passing, making sure that that's really thought out on how that's done. And would you recommend that be a family meeting, Moira, or is it okay for that to be done without the other siblings knowing? What happens if they find out?
Yeah, you got it. That brings us to the next one on the list, which I actually modified in response to COVID because of what was happening. So if Maroki wants to bring up the next one, I think that leads into it.
There we go.
There we go. Of having respectful and productive and tender money conversations. The tenderness is even more important during times of stress. Everything becomes so much more fraught. And one of the things that we can throw overboard as kind of like, okay, it's not, I'm too stressed to have this in my life. One of those things that we can throw overboard that we shouldn't is empathy. So slowing it down and figuring out what would make this productive. One of the things that makes it so hard for couples to make changes in problematic dynamics in their financial life, one of those things is that they never make progress on things. That it feels like Groundhog Day. They've had the same disagreement for years. And so somehow having conversations that get you beyond where you've always gotten to. And again, if you need to talk to a financial professional or get some wise counsel somewhere, your therapist, your pastor, about figuring out what is the smallest step that we can take that will get us closer to that place that we want to be, which is knowing that we've left our family with a possibility of future harmonious relationships after we die. That we haven't put some poison pill in the system by secretly donating funds. God forbid that you're even keeping that secret from your spouse. Like, talk about poison pill. So figuring out how to do that and making sure that in the process, we're hearkening back to some of the earlier ones, that you're giving sustainably. Nobody's going to be helped if you torpedo your own retirement and your own, especially at the end of life when you might need expensive long-term care. it's not good if you're torpedoing that now to help adult children who might have access to more than you would have access to right now. We've even, you and I have even talked about how it's possible to get a student loan. So it may be that you can't contribute to your kids' university funds anymore because it's not possible to get a long-term care home loan. And so we have to watch. We've got to be able to pivot in response to reality. Yeah.
And you as someone married to a pilot and, you know that every time you're on a plane, as hard as it is, it's like in the event of emergency, you've got to don that mask first. Then you can help others. But for so many parents, that's easier said than done. But it's great advice, Moira. So number 9, use money. I love this to help people and causes. Oh, sorry. Nope. Were we on number 9? Yes.
I think we're on number 8.
We're at number 8, safeguard your dependents and your assets. And we're talking about that today as National Seniors Day. So yes, thank you I was so excited. I skipped ahead, Moira. Tell us about number 8.
Well, we could circle back to that one, Kelley, if you want to, because I would so love to hear your wisdom about this. When I wrote that, I was thinking about everything that it means to safeguard a family financially. And that includes everything that was on the list prior, but then things like making sure that you have adequate insurance and making sure that you are protected from those many, many people, some of them frank fraudsters and scam artists, con artists, and some simply people who don't have your best interest at heart. People, even financial professionals who are not acting from this thing we call the fiduciary standard. So getting skills around safeguarding your hard-earned or hard-received financial assets to make sure that they're there for you and your dependents when they're most needed. But because this is Seniors Day and you are, so much about consumer protection, I'd kind of love to end our call with discussions about that, if that's okay with you.
Sure, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. You bet. We'll see how much time we have because we've already blown through. We've only got probably about 15 minutes left, Moira.
Okay.
It's been a fascinating conversation. Okay, so then now let's get to the exciting number 9, my favorite of your tip.
Oh, the giving causes, right? One of the things that I'm hearing from people right now it's a lovely frustration. I mean, it speaks to their hearts, and that's what I think is lovely about it, but it's not any less frustrating, is that many of the things that people used to be involved with in terms of giving of time and energy, those are now, they've just come to an abrupt halt. Even stuff like volunteering at a food kitchen, if you were used to standing there ladling out soup, they don't need your help as much anymore because they're just handing out paper bags. And so many of the public events or the group events have been shut down. So if you've been a scout leader or a Sunday school teacher or fill in the blank, many of those things have come to a halt. So it does mean that giving now may be more financial by necessity than it used to be, because it used to be that you come in energy more directly.
Yeah.
That being said, there's always room for creativity and making sure that you are giving time to the people that of your choosing, that you are really rethinking where it is that funds are going. And is this just a default that was set in place a long time ago, and now it's time to consciously revisit it? So those are some of the things that I was thinking about when I wrote that.
Love that. And number 10, arrange for wealth transfers. You touched on this a little bit, but.
Yeah. So we know that the percentage of Canadians living without wills and end-of-life medical directives that those are just frightening. Even the number of people who haven't even had basic conversations about those things, so that their fans who may be called to act on their behalf, they don't even know what you would have wanted because you never talked about it. So really needing to make sure that there's communication around that, and that there's action around getting the will set up and communicating what it is that you want to have happen. The reading of the will should not be a gotcha time in family life. Should not be, nobody should be surprised.
Right.
So what you said earlier about if you're going to gift, give more to one child in the family now than at another time, if you know that there are different expectations, it's not that you should just go and blurt them all out so that everybody knows. There needs to be discernment. There needs to be, and the good news is you can develop that skill to communicate those things and to trickle it out and to see what went well in that approach to the conversation. And it may be that you have to go back and lick your wounds for a while and then, okay, back into the fray as you figure out a better way to deal with that particular child or that particular individual. And it's just part of the safeguarding. Where do you want this to go? And how will you help set it up so that it can happen peaceably and legally and safely?
Yeah, and I heard you speak for the Edmonton Community Foundation talking about this to a lot of the stakeholders. Moira, you and I have also talked in depth about, something you think as simple as like on your to-do list, get your will done, update your will. Why is it so hard? Is it because people are not thinking through that there's really maybe 20 steps, maybe 30 steps, maybe they're very emotionally charged, that it's not enough to just have that one thing on your to-do list? Like, what is it that's holding people back from doing it or updating, or what are some of the things?
Well, you're talking to somebody who needs to update her will. So here's here's part of it. That is actually a really useless to-do list item.
Yeah.
Because in fact, I can't update my will. So I look at that and I go, here's what I can do. I can make an appointment with my lawyer. That is an actionable to-do list item. So part of it is, there's that famous book years ago called Getting Things Done. And the notion of many time management systems that executives are coached in is that you've got to get it down to the thing that you actually are responsible for and put that in your to-do list and date it, because it's not real until it's scheduled. So that's a big part of it, Kelley, is, can people write down the smallest step and can they get it into their daytime or their Google Calendar or whatever it is that they're using. So, because we tend to keep commitments we've made to ourselves once the appointments have been made. So that's
so true.
Part of it.
So true. And I love that. And part of it too is you don't have to know everything. You don't have to figure everything out to put it in your calendar to then call the lawyer, right? That can just be step one. You don't have to worry about all of the other steps, the conversations, who you're gifting things to, all of that other hard stuff. Just start with one thing, right?
Because again, if social supports, if other people are best, then the lawyer may know exactly who you need to talk to if you want to put if you want to embed philanthropic wishes right into your will, right? You don't have to know that. You just have to take the first step, and things tend to happen afterwards. Or, for example, if you're getting stuck on writing a will because you know you're going to have to name a guardian for your children, that perhaps one of the first steps, is make that appointment with the lawyer for 2 months down the road, get that in the calendar, and between now and then, write in 3 people that you're going to call on a specific day to talk to them about how do you make a decision about guardianship? How did they do it?
Right.
And just see what kind of information comes forth. So
Yeah, that's really actionable. Yeah, that's really actionable.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it, Moira. Okay, we just have a few more minutes. Talk to me, good, and that was great, by the way, your top tips. If you want to go and dig into that more, go to moneymindandmeaning.com. You're going to find so much great information, but I teased the start of this talk with a couple of your other articles, Moira. Tell us a little bit about the perils of pre-spending, maybe for some of the people that are getting an increase on their credit card, going into some more debt, or just found more money because of COVID.
This is something that I think I wrote that article at a time when the NHL was going into strike. And because I work with a lot of pro athletes, I know that sometimes when you know that a check is coming your way, and that can be a tax refund or a CERB check, and you know it's coming, it kind of feels to you like it's unbounded, and it's I'm going to call it free money, free in the sense of kind of free range. It's not attached to anything except your hopes and your longings about it. And so mentally we start pre-spending it. It's like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then we may actually do more than mentally. We may actually buy some stuff before those funds are in our account. And heaven forbid, if there are delays or our expectations do not come to reality, we're in trouble. So that phrase, show me the money, is something that you have to make yourself do to yourself before you commit to spending money that you don't have.
Yeah, and maybe that's just the culture of, being where credit cards are ubiquitous. Like when I grew up, or my mom's generation, right? She had a credit card, but her generations beforehand didn't. And if you didn't have the money, you didn't buy it. There was no pre-spending at all.
There was no mechanism for it.
Yeah, exactly. But now people can be maxed out and they're still pre-spending, which I get it. Hey, I've done it. No finger wagging here, but it's a really difficult one to kind of rein in. Tell us quickly the best ever productivity hack. I didn't dig into this one because I wanted to hear it from you, Moira. I got to hear that one.
That one was about a particular issue that I often procrastinate on. And so I wrote about that, which was the act of writing, and how I formed, again, on the science of other people are our best resource. I formed a writing group, and we get together every Wednesday, and it's parallel play. We are not even in the same country. I just have people at different times, at the same time in different locations. We all work on writing at the same time. And it's just been, they're not imaginary playmates, but almost. And we get things done because we've got this accountability that will check in at the beginning of an hour, midway through, and then at the end of the period. And that accountability and knowing that other people are in the trenches with me has made such a difference.
Absolutely. Moira, here's a question that little did you know. Here's a question that came in. I don't feel like I'm at the age to learn more skills. How can I pivot at this point?
So I'm assuming we're talking about marketable skills and job readiness. One of them is to do that really clear analysis of what are the marketable skills you already have, and where might there be a market for that. And this can include, I've done this with people who didn't think they knew anything. And, what do you do well? And I know I am a great ironer. Well, it turns out there are people who gladly pay you to come into into their house and iron for a couple of hours. So if what you might be able to do is take your skills and find out whether there's a virtual audience for them, as in maybe somebody who's not in your network currently, but who would love you to be able to do that thing remotely, or maybe there's somebody that you don't have to learn the skill of using social media, but there's somebody in your network who can help bring your skills to the attention of folks in your network who would love to pay you to do those things. So first, identify what it is you have that you know how to do and you would like to do, and then start networking like crazy to find out, is there a market for it? And if there were, how would I tap into it?
That's really sound advice. Thanks, Moira. Here's another question, and
keep,
I think if you don't, yeah, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to encourage that person, try to keep an open mind about what is something that you are curious enough about that you might be willing to learn about it. There are organizations out there. One of my favorites, Kelley, is called Coursera. So COURSERA.org, Coursera.org. Free courses in everything from, I kid you not, chicken husbandry to how to code in the computer language Python.
Wow.
And it's free. And so go to things like that offer these free courses and find out, is there something there that you'd be keen to develop? Because curiosity is a strength you may be able to tap into that almost allows you to get because all you're doing is following your curiosity.
Love that. That is the best advice. And I know if you've got a library card, you probably have tons of information and courses available to you too, like lynda.com. There's free stuff on LinkedIn. So many great free courses like never before. It's just your imagination. So as we're running out of time, we're getting a ton of questions in. I'm going to handle this one super, super quick, Moira. What can I do to help my parents from internet fraud? Are there things to look out for? Yes, I could write a whole book on it. I have. Where I want you to go is the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. You can watch our Twitter feed, but go to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre and the Canadian Bankers Association, Ontario Securities Commission. We'll have those links at the bottom of this post, because not only are they going to tell you what's happened, but they're going to tell you what the trends are, what to be on the lookout for, because there's nothing, Moira's talking to you about all of these tips to appreciate your money, earn more money, save it, hold on to it. You don't want the fraudsters taking it from you. So just before we wrap, Moira, one more question here. How do I, and if you can answer this in a couple of minutes, how do I manage the expectations of my different children, especially if one is receiving more aid than another? That's a tough one.
This is one of the tough things, and families have, frankly, different values around this. So some families, it is, I treat each of my children equally. And if I give $10 to one, I will give $10 to another, or, and add however many zeros after that are appropriate for your situation or appropriate for the age of the children. And in some families, it's not what is equal, but what is fair and needed. And ultimately, you can use discussions about fair versus equal, about why I'm giving here and why I can't or won't give other places. You can develop those productive, the ability to have productive and respectful and tender money conversations as a way of communicating your values as parents and what it is that you are hoping to transmit. And whether that means that we do give more money to people who have legitimate needs and for more help. If that's one of your core values, then stand up for that and explain it. But you also need to be willing to hear if your kids are saying, Mom, so-and-so is taking advantage of you.
Right.
Or your giving has now reached the point of enabling. That rather than rejecting that outright, to be able to say, if that were true, what would I be seeing? Or would that be true? And be able to be open to things being a discussion and a process. Good thing about families is that they just keep on going. And so we've got a lifetime of learning how to get better at these things.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Well, Dr. Somers, an hour flew by. My goodness, thank you so much for sharing your top financial skills for the modern family. You can find Dr. Moira Somers at moneymindandmeaning.com. Remember, unfortunately, she is not there for individuals, but she is through your financial professional. If you are an advisor, reach out to Dr. Somers. She's got some incredible courses. You'll want to check out her book, Advice That Sticks. And for anyone watching, you'll want to see her newsletter as well and dig into that. She's so thoughtful. Maroki and I love your newsletters. So thought-provoking. And your writing style is amazing too, Moira. And you can find all of this at kelleykeen.com/blog. We'll have all the resources and links at the bottom of this. And if you found some value, please share it with someone in your life. So thank you, Dr. Somers.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Be well. Stay safe. Thank you, my friend.
Bye-bye.